All right. Hello. My name is Lauren. I do publicity and marketing for Five Prince Publishing. I am super excited. I'm going to wait here for a few more people to jump in. But today we are going to be talking to one of our authors. We've got a release next Tuesday, 1 week from today on February 4th. And I am talking to one of our authors who is releasing a book, Russell Archie. I am going to, let me see, I got to get him in here. Let me invite him and we will start chatting. Let's see. All right. All right, I invited him, so let's see. He should be hopping in here soon. Russell is the author of the Obscured Throne Trilogy, which the first two books are already out, and we are releasing the third book next Tuesday. Hi, Bernadette. Hi, Barbara. Let's see. Russell, I see that you're in here. Let me see if I can pop you into my video. Russell, on your it just told me you're unable to join. No, why? Russell, on your screen, do you see like the little camera with the plus sign? If you click on that and try to come in on your end, that might work better. Oh, thank you, Sarah. Try to get you in here. Maybe. There it is. All right, here we go, I think. I always have technical difficulties with this, so hopefully that doesn't happen. There we are. Hello.
Hi. Apparently, I was trying to join from my computer.
Oh, no
Um,
worries.
so because I would work from my computer much better, but apparently it doesn't like that. So we're going to have to stick
There's
with
always
my,
something.
we're going to have to stick with my phone, I guess. So
No worries. That's
hopefully,
perfect.
yeah, hopefully everything's picking up okay. So
I I can hear you. I think as long as everyone else can hear you, it seems like everyone does. We should be good to go. All right,
great.
so I'll get started. We've got quite a few people in here, so that's awesome. So, like I said, we are talking to Russell Archie today about his upcoming release next Tuesday. Russell, would you mind, for our readers who maybe haven't read the first two books, if you want to give us a little brief overview of the Obscured Throne Trilogy and then dive maybe a little deeper into telling us about the book that we are releasing on Tuesday?
Yeah, I would love to. This is my first trilogy, and I wrote it because I've always had the idea of what if Lovecraftian, like eldritch, unexplainable monstrosities invaded like Tolkien's world? Like, how would fantasy characters, peoples who are used to like goblins and orcs and dragons and all this stuff, deal with things like Cthulhu, you know? Um, and so I'm a big horror fan, a big dark fantasy fan. And so I started to write, I wanted to write my own story. And so the Obscured Throne Trilogy is basically a it's told through a bunch of short stories that all have an overarching story to tell. Kind of like when you watch a TV series, that each episode is self-contained but tells kind of an overarching narrative. and there's certain stories that kind of push the core story along, while other stories are kind of doing world building, showing you all that's going on in this whole world. It envelops the entire world. So it's how the people deal with it, and so it's basically kind of like post-apocalyptic fiction or post-apocalyptic fantasy,
Oh,
because it's after the fall of like a high fantasy world into one that's just been absolutely destroyed and in the process of just being devoured by these, like I said, these eldritch, unnameable monstrosities. So,
I love
um,
it.
and so the trilogy goes through, and each one gets closer and closer to what's going to happen at the very end. Like, it is a solid ending. There's no question about the end. So,
Wonderful. Wonderful. And, as you're talking about this, I was going to mention this anyway, but you're using a lot of terms like high fantasy, dark fantasy. And so, could you just explain to our readers kind of the differences between dark fantasy, high fantasy, low fantasy, and then also a little bit about how you classify? You kind of dived into this a little bit, but how you classify this trilogy within those kind of definitions.
yeah. So high fantasy, low fantasy, dark fantasy, urban fantasy, epic fantasy, like there's all the different kinds, but some of them intermingle a lot. High fantasy is what you think of when you think Lord of the Rings or um, Game of Thrones or anything like that. It's a setting that has its own culture, its own history, its own nations, its own rules, and all of that. Whereas low fantasy deals a little bit more um, with uh, what's the word I'm looking for here? Kind of like what are people doing, human beings dealing with. There's not as much focus on. Um, there may not be as much focus on like the magic and the cultures and stuff like that, or it may be more. Um, it may be a little more down to earth. Epic fantasy and high fantasy are pretty much interchangeable because it's very big. It's saving the world. It's the entire nations clashing. Stuff like that. And low fantasy is more personal, more intimate storytelling. Dark fantasy is basically where instead of getting the knights save the day and all this stuff, it's very it takes a hard left turn into horror somewhere.
Mm.
It gets dark, it gets into the shadows, things like that. So like The Witcher is something dark fantasy, and and then urban fantasy is more like a modern setting. So like that would be something on, say, Earth or in like Chicago or something like that. So yeah, high fantasy. Great examples are like the Lord of the Rings. Low fantasy would be like Harry Potter.
Mm.
Um, and Game of Thrones does a good job of kind of mixing both.
Mm.
So they're not, all exclusive at the same time.
Oh, wonderful. And so for the trilogy itself, would you classify that? I think you mentioned that's more high fantasy, horror fantasy, dark fantasy.
Uh, I would say it does involve stuff going on a worldwide
Oh,
scale. It does
okay.
involve like, um, I like making things complicated when I write, I guess. So
Don't we
it's
all?
uh it's high fantasy in the sense that, yeah, it's the fate of a world in the balance,
Mm.
but not many of the stories deal with like big epic clashes. It does dwell more on individuals or small groups of people, and what they're dealing with as the result of this cataclysmic event, in the book called The Rupture, where their entire world changed in minutes.
Mm.
And so it's how the how people are dealing with it, and you're told some of the bigger scale stuff through viewpoints or documents or things of that nature. Um, I believe it was, yeah, it's Ghosts of Alda has one story where two armies are clashing,
Mm.
but there's not a lot of like large scale stuff that happens um, as far as like armies clashing and stuff like that. So, but it is like the fate of the world that is being fought for.
Mm,
But it's on kind of like smaller scale stuff. That's the kind of like the Lovecraftian angle of it.
yeah.
Is you do have these people that are finding these like forbidden books, or trying to stop these rituals or things like that. That's fighting for this salvation, not big armies trying to like take over nations and bring stability. So
Mm-hmm.
this is like some guy is trying to stop a ritual in a village that's going to open up a hellgate or something. So
Wonderful. Yeah, and you've mentioned, I know one of your big inspirations, you talk a lot about H.P. Lovecraft, and that you really do bring in, it's not just fantasy, but you also bring in that element of horror. And so I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about, as an author, what that's like to kind of write that more dark and disturbing material.
well, I've been a horror fan my entire life. Grew up watching like Child's Play and Stephen King and all that kind of stuff. Killer Clowns from Outer Space, like everything. Um, and so I've always been a horror junkie, but I've also liked fantasy. And when I write, I try to think like, what would disturb me?
Mm,
It's hard to be scared by a book for me, just me personally. Um, so I try to take inspiration from stuff that has scared me as a reader. And though
mm-hmm,
I like Lovecraft's ideas in um, his writing doesn't necessarily scare me anyway. But there's another author that's inspired by him named Laird Barron,
mm,
who's the only author who's ever really scared me when I've read his work, and also the only author who just the title of a book gave me the shivers.
ooh,
Um, and so look I try to look at like his example and the type of stuff that he uses to frighten. And one of those concepts is the idea, because Lovecraft's ideas is what's called cosmic horror, which is humanity in the face of everything is less than a speck. There's nothing we can do about anything. There are things out there that are infinitely powerful than us, and they really, it's kind of like, when you see ants or something, you don't think about them, you don't pay them any mind. If you step on them, you just keep going. And that's what these things are. It's not that they're evil, they're just beyond our comprehension. And
mm.
they're just doing their thing. And that's that. Like, that's how little we matter. Um, Laird Barron took that and went, well, what if these things that are beyond our comprehension, there's nothing we can do about it, but they're malevolent? And
Mm,
so this is something I looked at that at the same time that I like that frightens me. Like, there are things that can be done or that can't be done about your fate or whatever. And it's not just there's nothing you can do, but it's these things are also not nice. And so
mm-hmm.
that's what I try to write about. Like, there's one of the things Lovecraft said that I still love in horror to this day is don't explain anything, because the stuff that your readers can come up with is going to be far worse than anything you can come up with. So if you try to explain all of the scary, you're either going to wind up disappointing them because you didn't write up to their expectations, or you're going to wind up looking like some sort of sick freak that they're like, who could think up of this stuff? So I try to strike a balance. Sometimes I explain things, other times I just leave it to their imagination. Because even when I try to go write some things, I'm like, can I bring myself to write that? Although I have seen reviews where people are like, it is like, I know this person isn't evil, but really, like, and I did actually get the response of, who hurt you? Like, and so
I feel like that's kind of a compliment, though. If you're, when you're writing in that genre, there's,
as a horror author, yeah, I take that as a compliment.
oh, I love it. That's great. Well, without, giving anything away, for our readers that did read those first two novels in the trilogy, what can they expect from Shadow of the Throne?
Like I said, everything gets tied up. There's no question about who wins or loses. I don't leave any open threads there. I tried to wrap everything up, but still, again, don't explain everything.
Yeah.
Um, I tried to tie up all kinds of loose ends. So there's some of the books kind of they'll end. The story itself will end, and some of the you're going to see characters come back, and you're going to get all these things that kind of dovetail together with certain characters from multiple stories because regions are attached to each other, and you're going to find out what's going on. I will say that one of the things I really liked is I'm writing fantasy, but there's no dragons, you know, because that's not really been the point of what I'm trying to say. But I was like,
Mm.
here's all these just big, nasty, like ethereal things, whether you call them gods or otherwise, that like how would like dragons are supposed to be the big bads or the big toughies of fantasy.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, so there is a story um, in this book that's from the viewpoint of the last living dragon in the
Oh,
world.
cool.
Um, so that's probably hopefully a highlight. Um, and, and the way I like to describe this story best is like a tapestry or a mosaic, really. A mosaic is the best way to describe it because you have the big overall picture, and each story is like a little piece in this mosaic. And so, like, as
Mm.
you're reading through the trilogy, like, yeah, there's going to be some pieces missing, but you can kind of see the overall picture. And this last book is putting those last pieces of the mosaic together so that each of these stories now builds the whole picture from beginning to end of this entire world.
I love that. Yeah, that I've never written a trilogy myself. And I imagine it comes with some mixed feelings as an author. I'm sure there's kind of a bittersweet feeling of kind of closing that chapter, wrapping it all up, but also a little bit of some sadness of letting it go. But what are you most looking forward to with the release of this book?
I'm just excited that when it's done, it's it's a complete trilogy. I mean, I never thought that, I couldn't imagine seeing the finale
Yeah.
of my first trilogy and this first big epic story being told. And it's both a sigh of relief, but also exciting that like this is done. Like this trilogy is complete, which is really cool to me.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
Yeah, what an accomplishment. Well, and congratulations on that. I'm so excited to see this trilogy be completed and have the full. I got to make a post with all three book
mhm.
covers, and it felt so cool to be able to do that. So I'm excited. Is there anything specific that you want readers to know before reading Shadow of the Throne?
So uh, Bernadette and Five Prince did take on something outside of their scope uh, by publishing the books that I write and everything. It is fantasy. If you're not familiar with Lovecraft, it may be a little jarring because there is some differences when it comes to things like the things that are included here. It's not just we're going to go slay the dragon. This is, these are things that are supposed to, like, just the thought of them, like, literally melts your brain. Like, you go insane just knowing about them. And so that's part of the fun and the challenge of writing about it. So, um, these are, this is a little different from like your typical fantasy, or at least I aimed for that anyway. So when you go to read this, like kind of come into it with an open mind, know that it is horror. I say dark fantasy, but it is horror fantasy. Like
Mm.
there's no pulled punches there. Um, yeah, like Game of Thrones or The Witcher, like people are going to die, but there's going to be some weird stuff happening like in this book. So
Wonderful. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, and Bernadette said mostly because you're cool. I love that. So switching gears just slightly, I did want to also kind of touch on your main thing that you do, which is voice acting. That's a very big part of your life.
yes.
It's kind of your main career. So I was wondering if you could share a little bit about your career as a narrator and a voice actor.
Yeah, so funny thing, I've been writing for longer, but it's just kind of been off and on until I finally, was able to get something published. I tried, just straight self-publishing, which I will never do again. Um, and I wound up getting into voiceover, which became my career. And I started doing audiobooks. And this is like, that's where I am now. I was going to take this from my studio so that I could be in here, not just on my phone. And apparently I'm a terrible millennial because I don't know social media. And so, yeah, that's what I do for a living, actually, is voiceover work. I love my job. I get to get up every day and just do these really cool things. Uh, I can, a lot of authors are like, oh, I'd love to get a audiobook done, but it's so expensive. I'm like, yeah, well, it's for me, I'm putting all this free work into myself. So, like right now, I'm actually working on the audiobook for Ghosts of Alda. I've been doing that. I've been working on that for the past. I don't get to put as much commitment into my own audiobooks as I do when, someone's like paying me to do it. So it's a little
Right.
bit slower, but it has been motivating to get this third book out and go, okay, now I can like finish the audiobook trilogy.
Yeah.
And so I got my start in audiobooks. Now I do a lot of documentaries. I do a bunch of corporate stuff. I have my own home studio right here that I'm in. Like this is outside my house on my property. I've been in video games. I my big work, or I do a lot of work for a true crime channel called Explore with Us.
Yeah, I've
Uh,
seen that.
so a lot of true crime, and like I said, I've done audiobooks. This year I did some I played some characters in Genshin Impact, which is really cool.
Oh, fun.
Um, and then I did a marketing video for Paramount for Smile 2, which
Oh,
was
cool.
amazing. I was like, I love that movie. I love those movies, and to like get to be a part of that, like, so I get to do these really cool things like every day for a living. Like I can't complain at all. So, and then I write, trying to make, my writing more pronounced. Now, hopefully finishing this trilogy, that'll be, I know a lot of people will wait for a trilogy or series to get done before they start on it. So I'm hoping this will help that as well. Um, but yeah, apparently I like to choose the real money makers in life. So
I love that. No, that's amazing. And it's so great too to hear when people just love what they do. It's amazing when people can say, I wake up and I have the best job ever. And I want to mention too, just because personally I really love it. I've seen your work with the true crime on YouTube. I've seen those videos. But I also want to shout out your podcast
oh,
because personally, I have recently become a fan. I grew up listening to like old radio show with my grandparents, and I don't know why, this is so dark and disturbing. I loved the horror radio shows and listening to them when we were camping and scaring myself. And your podcast, you read a lot of horror like H.P. Lovecraft, Edgar Allan
yeah.
Poe, which I personally love. And so, yeah, he also has a podcast. So if you like listening to creepy horror, definitely look it up. Can you, remind me of the name of it?
It's called The Dark Volumes.
The Dark Volumes.
It's
That's it.
strictly
Yes.
horror. That's the only thing I read on there. I've even thought about just dropping the little intro. I usually do a short introduction. When was the book published? What's a neat fact about the story or whatever. And I've gotten to the point where I'm like, should I just drop that and like just get right into the story? Because I'm like, that's what people are here for.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it's all. I can't believe I forgot to plug my own podcast. See, I'm a terrible millennial. I'm awful. Um,
I
it's no
got you.
wonder I have like 5 listeners. Um, so, but yeah, it's like, again, that's passion work for me because I love reading this stuff too. I do work with like authors because I have to do this stuff that's legally safe. I have to do like public domain work and stuff like that, which there's plenty of. Um, but if I do have like authors that I'll reach out to or that have reached out to me, and like I'll read their stories if they're more than happy for me to, if they have like a short story collection or something, um, as long as it's all okay, with them knowing that like, hey, I'll be more than happy to read it, but I'd love to read it, but I'm like, this isn't um, like paid work that I'm doing
Yeah.
or anything like that. So, um, but yeah, one of my goals is to have every story of H.P. Lovecraft's uploaded at some point, all the major ones. I want to get Frankenstein up there, Mary
Oh,
Shelley's Frankenstein.
oh, that's my
Uh,
absolute favorite book. So I,
Dracula. I'd love to get like the Bram Stoker's Dracula up there, but those would
that's
have to be like
amazing.
parted and parceled out
Oh
because,
yeah.
they're really big. And this is usually stories that are done, like short stories that are done.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah. Especially Dracula. That one I know that's a
yeah.
doozy. That's a long one.
And then someday I'd love to get a Laird Barron story on there, but I'd have to like, I don't know, bribe someone or something to get the
Well,
rights to put like a Laird Barron story on there.
I'll keep my fingers crossed that hopefully that happens eventually. Well, and you mentioned too that you've been recording through the Obscured Throne Trilogy. Where can people or readers who would like to listen to the audio, where can they find that when it is available?
Those will all be uploaded to
Oh,
Audible.
wonderful.
I go through ACX to publish it, so the easiest way is going to be through Amazon and Audible. Um, I'm gonna get better about repeat postings of certain things. Like I'll post hey, this audiobook's available, and then I'll never repeat post it. Um, as Bernadette's probably just shaking her head, going, "Jesus Christ." So yeah, I'll eventually start like but it's you can find me on Audible, even my past work, as a voice actor. I've read TH Leatherman's, I just did, I think it was uh Sunrise, his series, which is great. I love reading that. It was so much fun. I did all of the Wealth of Time series. So, and that was a great series to read, which has like more books coming out around it about other characters. So all like you can find my work or my books that I'm finishing, and all my past work just on Audible. Just search me up there.
Wonderful. Yeah. Well, if you're into audiobooks, definitely look that up on Audible. And like I said, if you love listening to horror stories, he's got a wide range. There's some short ones, there's some longer ones. The Dark Volumes podcast, it's great. So since we are wrapping up the Obscured Throne trilogy, what can our readers expect next from you? Are you working on anything? Are you
Um,
writing anything?
I'm so excited about it. I have two main things that I'm working on right now. Well, one I'm working on, one I've been putting ideas down for. So I was going to start my first series
Oh,
after this,
fun.
and it was again more dark fantasy, but not quite as out there as the Obscured Throne trilogy was. So I'm working on what I'm calling the Blackwoods Pages series, which is about a man from a basically a fallen noble house, and he takes on jobs kind of like Supernatural or The Witcher. Like he takes on jobs for exorcisms or the fighting. Not there's not a lot of monster fights like The Witcher. It's more kind of like exorcisms and hauntings and demons and stuff like this that he's dealing with. And there's a book that he received from his father, and he never got to look at it. And when he did, a lot of the pages were blank except for a couple. But every now and then, the pages will fill in, and he'll find out a little more and get like more spells, more things in his arsenal to use. But he starts finding out that like there's more tied to this book and with his family than he knew.
Ooh.
And so it deals a lot with him as kind of like like his house is kind of fallen now, and even though he is a noble, so by all rights and stuff, like he still gets treated at, but he gets snubbed at by nobles for being from a fallen house. He gets snubbed at by commoners and other people for being a noble, and so it's dealing with all his issues and the fact that he doesn't really give a care. I'm trying not to cuss here. I'm like a sailor if I don't watch out. um and
You're
so
doing very well.
and so that's a series that I'm working on. It's a lot of world building stuff like that because it follows him, and as he's finding out all this stuff about him, and the incursions coming in of like these stronger and stronger forces that are uh becoming at work in the world around him. So that's my first series that I'm working on. I have a one-shot novel though that I started before that. It's very different for me to write, and it's been so much fun writing. I can't wait to get it out. And it's a romantic horror comedy.
Oh, that sounds
and
so cool.
and so this is completely different. It's set in New York. It's all modern day stuff and everything. And I got the idea from a comic strip that I saw, and it was, I don't know if it was a D&D based or just a fantasy based one, but it was a short little comic panel that said sorcerers get their power from some sort of external patron, some sort of powerful patron. And it showed, in one panel it showed like really attractive woman, skimpy outfit, all dressed in white, long blonde hair, and said, I can uh, give you all the powers of the fae, um, in the natural world, and also sex. And then in the next panel was another attractive woman, skimpy clothes, but all in black with long dark hair and horns, and says, I can imbue you with all the fiery powers of hell, and also sex. And then below it is like this gribbly, like googly-eyed monster, like this slimy, ochre thing, going, I can show you all the maddening revelations of the cosmos, and also sex. And then at the very bottom panel, it shows the guy walking away with his arm around each of the fairy princess and the demon queen, walking away with them, and it shows the googly-eyed monster with his little tendrily appendages up in the air going, why does nobody ever choose me? And so, and I was like, you know what, yeah, abominations deserve love too.
Oh.
And that was like the start of the idea. So the book that I was calling the book for a while, Abominations Deserve Love Too. And so the working title now is changed to A Boy and His Abomination. And it's like I said, I really get to lean into my humor, uh, my commentary on things, and just like kind of fourth wall breaking as far as like the narration and stuff like that. I'm having a lot of fun with it. And like, is there like weird googly eyed like sex with a monster? Like, no, technically no. So it's like I can't wait to get that one out and then get on to my next series because I'm having a lot of fun writing this one.
That's
Um,
amazing. I love
so
that. That sounds so exciting. I can't wait. Well, thank you so much for chatting with me today and chatting with our readers about the new release and your voice acting. Like we said, he is on Audible with audiobooks, also on that true crime, on some YouTube stuff, and his podcast, The Dark Volumes. Russell, where else can our readers find you and connect with you on social media?
I'm on. I have a YouTube channel. If you look up my name, Russell Archie, hopefully I just pop up for you because I have a horrible name. Real easy to find. I'm on Instagram, Twitter, Blue Sky, uh, pretty much everywhere as far as that goes. And I'm always, I say always now. I'm really, I try to post like when new stuff comes out, and try to keep updated. I also try to post just normally so that you can get to like know me and everything. Again, crap millennial, but I'm working on it. So
No worries. Wonderful. Well, like I said, thank you so much, Russell. It was so great getting to chat with you. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Make sure that you check out the Shadow of the Throne next Tuesday, 1 week from today. And this Sunday, I will also be chatting with our other author who is releasing a book, Courtney Davis. So keep your eye out for that. And yeah, I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thanks again, Russell. It was great.
you too. Thank you so much, Lauren.
All right.